I have a question for all of you. Is Silent Hill evil? This is actually an interesting question the more you think about it. The knee-jerk reaction is, duh, blood-covered Nightmareland is textbook evil. However, I'd like to remind you, we've only rarely seen Silent Hill acting on its own. In Silent Hills 1, 3, Origins, and Homecoming, we saw Silent Hill being manipulated by the Order. And so this wasn't the town acting on its own. In Silent Hill 4, the entire situation was occurred due to Walter Sullivan's attempt to reincarnate the Order's god into Room 302. Then Shattered Memories was just a representative of Cheryl's psychological trauma. However, when the town acts on its own, in Silent Hills 2, Downpour, and PT, we see Silent Hill as it really exists, doing what it's supposed to do. Silent Hill punishes the guilty, helping them reform. In the games, specifically, it punishes murderers. This ends up helping the protagonists, as James and Murphy confront their sins, and, depending on their endings, might even earn forgiveness. However, others like Angela, Eddie, and Sator were broken by the torment, and ended up killing themselves. There's no information as to the fate of our cancelled Silent Hills protagonist, but hints in PT that he was guilty of familicide put him firmly in the group of those who deserved to be punished. On the other hand, the innocent seem to have nothing to fear. This is most notable in Laura, who skips through Silent Hill 2 unscathed, seeming to treat the town as a playground. The webcomic Silent Hill Promise continues this, as the innocent Edith and devoted Carmichael were unharmed by the town's power. Then there's the fact that there's an entire city of normal people who live in Silent Hill, unscathed by the nightmare world. Now, this is a surprisingly Christian philosophy for a Japanese game. The idea greatly mirrors the concept of purgatory. In traditional Catholic doctrine, torment and torture are used to purify souls of believers before they are allowed into heaven. Dante's Purgatorio explores this in detail, as different torture is used in each of the 7 layers of purgatory to purify you of the 7 deadly sins, such as lying face down to cleanse pride, or having to run constantly to remove sloth. This is even reflected in the Jewish tradition, in the parable of Potter in Jeremiah 18, as the prophet describes God fixing Israel like a potter fixing a broken pot by breaking it into clay and then reforming it. In a more modern sense, we also see this theme in the Christmas Carol, where Scrooge is haunted by ghosts in order to force him to change his ways. Or the story of the Ghost Riders, which similarly tries to scare the nameless cowboys straight. Punishment to redemption is a fairly common theme throughout much of Western culture. So in the end, the goals of Silent Hill seem to be noble, and even the means are not altogether different from Christian morality. So does this mean that this town is actually a dark angel, which seems twisted, but is really on the side of righteousness? Well, let's talk a bit about methods. At the risk of stating the obvious, psychological torment is not exactly considered good. There is a reason that while Satan was considered part of God's court in Job, he was never referenced anywhere in the Bible as an angel. However, again, we are considering punishment for the guilty, literal gods punishing literal murderers. But there's a final point that I'd like to put up for consideration. Are the people in Silent Hill tormented by these judgmental gods? Or are they tormented by themselves? After all, Walter Sullivan, an unrepentant serial killer, seemed able to not only wander Silent Hill freely, but bend it to his will. And both Claudia and Dahlia murdered for their god, including human sacrifice of Dahlia's daughter, but were unpunished. On the other hand, each of the characters who actually suffer believed themselves guilty. Angela was at worst meting out justice when she killed her rapist father. but she wanted to die. James put Mary out of her misery, but was racked with guilt. He again came to Silent Hill in order to commit suicide. John Sater became a hopeless drunk after his negligence caused the death of the kids on the train. Murphy was guilt-ridden. He killed his son's murderer, but at the cost of his entire life and freedom. Even Howard Blackwood, the postman, who's been trapped in Silent Hill for over a century, was revealed in the Past Life comic series to have a dark past as a slave overseer, which would obviously haunt him for eternity. So perhaps Silent Hill isn't evil or good. Perhaps it's just providing the means for people to punish themselves when they feel that they are guilty. Interestingly, this interpretation even brings Shattered Memory back into the main canon, as there's no reason that Cheryl's mental anguish wouldn't also be a catalyst for the town's power, as she feels guilt over her father's death. Hell works the same way in the Sandman universe, where you are sent to hell only if you believe yourself worthy of it. So, in conclusion, Silent Hill is neither good nor is it evil, if it's even sentient as we know it. Instead, the town is a reflection of the ones who enters its borders. It outwardly manifests inner conflict, a dark mirror, an abyss you have to look through in order to come out on the other end. Thanks for listening, y'all.